Now you join me today at the wheel of one of the few asymmetrical cars you'll find on the market. Yes, today I am driving a Z11 shape Nissan Cube. Hello, welcome to Furious Driving. Now it's not often that the boot lid is the most memorable feature of a car, but in this case, it actually is for some reason. So walking around the side of the Cube, you can see it is one of those cars that absolutely lives up to its name. It's a bit like, the Mitsubishi Charisma. Okay, maybe not that one, but the rest of the car is virtually square. 1.6 meters and change tall, 1.6 meters and change wide. So from the back of the car or the front of the car, you are looking at a square, a cube almost. And lengthwise, it's 3.7 meters long, so it's virtually two cubes end on end. It's basically a giant Lego brick minus the knobbly bits on top. And this gives it incredible levels of practicality inside because you haven't got those awkward, annoying curves, which mean that it gets smaller on the inside than it needs to be. So you've got the most space per buck, bang for buck, space for buck, whatever, inside this thing absolutely possible, which means that as the M class of small MPV goes, this is about as effective and as useful as you're possibly going to get. Now, believe it or not, this is actually a second generation Cube. The Z11 came out in 2002 and replaced the Z10, which had been around since 1998, and to be honest, looks nothing like this car at all, and barely looks very Cube-like either, to be perfectly honest. If you saw one, you wouldn't think Cube, unlike this one. And the replacement for this one, the Z12, still looks quite cubey, but it's much more curvaceous and, again, less cubified than the Cubey Cube. Now underneath it is based on a third generation Nissan Micra, or March as it was known out in Japan. But into this tiny space, which is 1 millimeter shorter than the Micra it's based on, they've managed to get two doors down both sides. Full-size doors that are actually easy to climb into, even in the back. And of course, that incredible rear door. And on top it's a lovely huge flat roof as well, so you can put roof bars and what have you on top, no problem. And it's a great big expanse of metal. And of course everyone who's got one of these things has to do a little bit of customization, so at the very least you'll expect to find wind deflectors and some kind of tiki doll in the dashboard. Now these really do have a style all of their own, although you look at certain things like the Flex in America from Ford, they have kind of borrowed the style and made it a bit bigger. And most people these days now seem to buy these as a style or a fashion statement or just wanting something a bit different or unusual. But in Japan, these were the biggest selling car in the entire Japanese market for the entire production run from 2002 to 2009. And these were customizable even from the factory. Not only were there quite a few different unusual versions, this is the Conran version with the beautiful bitter chocolate metallic brown paint and red leather. There were factory customization options, so you can send a car straight off to a customizer and have it supercharged and body kitted from the dealership. But even as standard, without going that far, there were 12 different grills you could have on this thing. Now, other options on the car included 14 or 15-inch alloys, depending on the model. This one came with these wheels from Japan because these cars were import only. They were never sold in Europe or the UK. They were sold almost exclusively in Japan. The Mark II, the Z11, did go to America for a few years, but because of the strength of the yen versus the dollar, they weren't a big seller. And so when the Z12 came out, that stopped being imported to America, and the Z12 did come over here to the UK. Fortunately, being a Japanese car, it's right-hand drive already, so we could have had this all along, so we kind of missed out there. But then under the bonnet, we have got another 14 or 15 choice, because a 1400 or a 1500cc four-cylinder engine as your choice. One of the options from the customizers was to go and get a supercharger fitted to this thing, which raises the either 102 or 107 bhp to quite considerably more. Now the only gearbox options with this were automatic. There's a 4-speed auto or a Cvt, no manual. Now, as I said at the beginning, the thing that everyone seems to pick up on and remember about the Cube is the fact it's got a wonky back door. It's got an asymmetrical glass panel to metal panel on the left to right hand sides because the massive back door hinges all the way into this panel here, which means you've got a massively wide opening. And everyone seems to remember that. So on this side, it's a very pretty clamshell that goes all the way around like that. The glass continues its curve from the rear panel into the side panel, which is also curved, like on a Mini Cooper. On this side though, the metal curves into the metal, and there's no glass, but a plastic blanking pad that looks a bit like an air vent, which might actually be an air vent. On the inside, they've used this practical space very practically. Now before we delve in, let's have a quick look at these rear lights, because one of the many customizations on these Cubes are the tail lights from the main dealer, from aftermarket. There are loads of variations to make your lights different. In this particular case, they've taken one of the reversing lights and painted it red to make it into a rear fog light, because for the UK market you have to have at least one rear fog. Now delving inside, we've got lots of stuff. First of all, we've got a huge square opening, because it's a big square outside as well. Big square inside, makes sense really. It's a bit of a drop down into the floor, but the owner of this car has actually made a false floor, a second deck, so he can put things underneath there and still have a full floor and load things easily. We've taken it out to show you what it looks like normally today though. And again, on the inside it's different to the outside. Obviously there's a window up on the left with a little light next to it. There are big hooks both left and right. The one on the right has got what we believe to be a Nissan factory clippy strap, which is useful. On the left hand side there's a small cubby hole with a tall area above it, so you can use a clippy strap this side and put tall items in there. This has a small deep cubby hole. It's a really weird shape. It's like an inverted pyramid that's been squashed on its side into the bottom down here, which again has a big open trough area in here, ideal for holding baguettes, bunches of flowers, long ceremonial swords, that kind of thing will all be held in place here, all well and good. There's also a great big area of storage in the door itself. You'll notice the plastics don't feel particularly high quality, but all these years on, after heavy family use, they're still in one piece, which says a lot. Finally in here there is two more interesting things. First of all, this is not just a curry hook, this is a full Christmas 3-course meal with wine and beer and crackers hook. It's a monster. You could swing all kinds of stuff off that. And secondly, there are two power outlets. Interestingly, these two power outlets are not 12 volt, they are 20 volt, because this car not only has a 12 volt battery under the bonnet for the engine and the car systems, it's got a leisure battery in it as well. So if you're mini MPVing in your mini MPV and want to run cool boxes, compressors, all kinds of other camping equipment, you can from this pair of 20 volt outlets here in the boot. What an incredible car. And there's one more thing as well, which I'd completely forgotten about. The seats slide all the way forward, so if you've got to carry a washing machine or a sumo wrestler, or I don't know what you're going to stick in the back of this thing, they will fit in there. Of course, obviously that is at the expense of rear legroom, because there is now literally none. It's touching the front seats. You can do that. Of course, you can always bring these all the way back and fold the seats flat as well. You have many options. Right, so climbing in, we've got a big contrast coloured door handle, opens up nicely, and then the door aperture, although it's a slight step down into the car, the aperture itself is absolutely enormous. And people always say you've got to buy an SUV because it's easy to climb into, but you just kind of slide into this thing, no bother at all. I may have mentioned SUVs not being the most practical and sensible solutions, maybe once or twice in the past, but yeah, this one again hammers that point home. Now let's start with these doors. Again, big and, well, cubey and cubic, apart from the round bits. First of all, we've got lots more of this hard plastic, which is not the most tactile stuff, but it does have an interesting kind of snakeskin texture moulded in and embossed into it. So that's good solid stuff, which again doesn't feel amazing high quality stuff like you would get in like a Mercedes or a Volvo or something, but it has lasted incredibly well, so that says it all. Then you've got this nice contrast colour panel. That's light brown, this is dark brown, a soft fabric, which is again quite hard wearing. Then these lovely curvy round door handles, like a UFO shaped thing. Such a solid lump of plastic just there, and very Japanese clunky pulls to lock your central locking open and closed. Listen to that. And then the door below that, we've got all our usual controls: 4 electric windows, auto only on the driver's side, lockout for the rear passengers, and a second central locking control. So we've got central locking there and there. If that's too far away for you, you can use that one. Big solid door pull, big practical door bin, although quite narrow, so very much chocolate bars and maps only. Single door speaker only down there, no extra tweeters hidden anywhere else. Onto the dashboard, the T-shelf. Now I have to say, I wore this t-shirt for a reason today. We don't just throw these things together, you know. This is a T-shelf of epic proportion, huge, flat. Well, obviously it's a massive boxy car, it's going to have a massive boxy T-shelf. Obviously that is an airbag, so you should not use that T-shelf when the car is in motion. But in addition to that, we've got so many surprise cup holders. You will enjoy this if you're a fan of the cup holder. This is more of the textured plastic snake skin, and everything else around it is continuing the boxy theme with occasional curves. This kind of mirrors the door handle here with its curve end on a very flat topped square area of instrument binnacle, and it's all interesting shades of brown. Because this is the Conran version with its metallic brown exterior, we've got a slightly cinnamon hued brown plastic, which is quite interesting as well, and a brown leather steering wheel. The brown luxury continues. Is that a thing? Now let's move over. First we've got little vents in the top, and then we've got curious air vents on the side, because they are, well, they're just air vents at first, but then if you don't want to see the air vents, you just roll them all the way flat, so you, almost as though you've got nothing there at all. As if by magic they come back. Then we have these cup holders which don't push and slide out. You have to manually pull them out to click, and they don't look like they're going to be particularly substantial, but it will take the Furious Driving cup test rather well, although there's a little bit of motion in there, so you don't want to be taking too many hard corners with a cup in there, or you're going to be wearing that drink. And slides back in again. You'll notice it has a lower area which drops down and then retracts as you push it in. Under here we've got a few more little buttons, headlamp levelers, an aftermarket switch for the rear fog light, mirrors, which also open and close on the button. Then up to the dials, quite a small instrument cluster and all silver with orange. It looks very, very fun and early noughties, because this is a fun early noughties car, so that does make sense. If you were any doubt we had a Cvt gearbox, here is the little logo in the dashboard telling us so. Speedometer goes up to 110, which I suspect is faster than the car will go. Revs up to a red line at 6,500 RPM, so that's going to be screaming away. Moving back, we've got a column shift on this car with a sport button on top, and there's a little sport light down there which will light up when that is pushed. Over to the left we've got our wipers, rear wipers, main wipers, so many intermediate speeds as to be just lost in there for weeks, and a mist function as well. Over to the right we have got our indicators and our headlights. Because this is an import Japanese car, so Japanese market JDM, we have still got the indicators on the right hand side with the light switch. And we have the horn in the centre. Poppy, like it. Next we have the infotainment area, as it would be called in today's language. This is a triple DIN space, which is quite unusual. So you've got the choice of either a single DIN with a pair of open areas or storage areas. This is a amazingly found correct colour of cinnamon metallic mauvey brown plastic accessory, or you could have covered areas, open areas, double DIN, single DIN radio, any combination that you want. So again, way more customization. More air vents, which this time don't rotate beyond that much. And then heating and ventilation controls, all almost normal, although it is completely circular on almost all of the controls. Then underneath that we've got more interesting stuff. We've got a little tray for sweetie wrappers, and then we have the lighter socket. Okay, this is interesting, but there's a big cutout at the bottom of the lighter socket, so you can open and close that with something plugged in. But more than that, that does even allow you to take a USB adapter and plug it in through the hole, so you can have the nice looking flush fitting dashboard, no problem at all, and still have your phone or sat nav charging. That's absolute genius. This is before USB was a thing in cars, and yet it's all ready and waiting. These people thought of literally everything. They must have time travelled or done something. I know Nissan think of a lot. In this case they thought of beyond the future. Then in between there, almost completely hidden, well, you've got a tiny weeny vertical cubby hole, which I have no idea what you could put in there. Some kind of, I don't know. I'm at a loss to think of an amazingly amusing thing to say with what to shove in there. One glove can go in there. That's probably something in Japanese telling you exactly what to put in there. Shift lock release push button, so you can lock your shift lock. Then more hooks for hanging things underneath the dashboard. I guess if you've got shopping and want to dangle it down there, there you can. Maximum 5 kilos, that's a substantial bit of plastic. A small luggage net for small luggage. Over to the left below our extra airbag, we've got the glove box, which has got an interesting little texture which we find nowhere else on the car. You might be thinking this is going to be elsewhere on the dashboard, on the doors, on the shots, somewhere, but no, it's just literally on the glove box lid. That's a little tiny glove box with slots for putting cards and stuff in there. Then a tray where you can fill up with soup, and have a straw to the passenger compartment, and then underneath that a huge glove box cantilevering out, big enough for your handbook and many other things. More Japanese instructions on that little label down there saying many probably vitally important stuff that I can't read. And then underneath there we also have, still from Tokyo, the little flare that all Japanese cars have to carry in case of emergency. And finally, one more rolling over air vent and another cup holder. Now then, moving back into these chairs, this is almost a bench seat. They are individual chairs, but they are kind of sculpted into a big bench. Again, the Conran edition gets extra nice, lovely interior stuff. So look at this beautiful red leather. I mean, red is obviously the best colour for all car interiors. That is a fact which we can't argue with, and it works so well here. I've not seen these horizontal rather than vertical stripes in a seat very often. It does look a bit different, and then it does change to baseball mitt styling vertical stripage of the leather seats in the centre section. And then again, for your cup holder delectation, we have a hidden surprise cup holder, and check out how these things fold out. It's like beautiful origami. It's a swan emerging from the chair that you can put a cup in. Now these are actually quite steady. They're quite deep and quite wide, so you can get a bit more stability, but they are quite fragile as well, so maybe only put an empty cup in there that you want to stay perfectly vertical. Additional storage, if you want it, is in the form of this armrest, which folds down for ease of comfort driving, but it does also have huge storage area, so you can keep more stuff in there. There's so much stuff that can be stowed away in this extremely practical car. Not practical enough for you? No problem. We've got more storage down here. Again, tons of space. This is, well, tiny MPV, so all the accoutrements of daily life can be stowed inside this many practically stowage pointed car. Goes without saying, but I'm going to say it anyway, the headroom is epic. You can be like 7 or 8 feet tall in this car and you still fit absolutely fine. It's quite remarkable. Let's have a look in the back. Now, climbing in the back, again, big square vertical door. It's like climbing into a bus or a van. Forget your SUVs, you barely even have to bend to climb in. You're sitting very, very vertically in this car now, so it's actually not uncomfortable at all. But my legs are not quite touching the front of the rear seat squab, but it's still comfortable enough to be quite nice. Got headrests in the back, got masses of headroom yet again. We have got grab handles for the rear passengers. We've got rear seat belts, obviously, goes without saying. You can access this rear storage if you want. Apparently the owner's kids do enjoy making little bridges out of this thing, but of course if you have put your sunglasses and chewing gum or whatever else in here, it will scatter across the floor if your kids do that. Notably, the rear seats floor area is almost completely flat across, like an old Range Rover or an electric taxi. It's a lovely flat area. And this is with the seats as far back as they go. Obviously when the seats are pushed forward, they will be a fair bit smaller. We do of course have another armrest here in the back as well, which has got yet more cup holders. So your cup holder needs are fully catered for in every possible eventuality. Now, climbing out for a second, under these innocuous looking floor mats, we do find secret hidey holes. On the left hand side one, we've got the secret hidey hole containing the jack and wheel brace, all hidden underneath there, Batman-like. And Batman has concealed on this side the leisure battery, so we can run leisure items in the back. So go camping, we are sorted. And there's a little bit of space for hiding more secret things. So if you are a Nissan Cube owner who uses this for hiding valuables, I'm sorry, I've just given your secret away. Now I think we really ought to get behind that wheel and take it for a drive. Right, it's a Japanese car, so the moment we put a key into it, it starts beeping. Ooh, a little bit of squeak off the alternator belt. With the car running, there's only a little guide moulded into the plastic panel here by this little furry bit to show you what gear is where, but it's hard to see from the driver's seat. But you have got a digital readout here: park, reverse, neutral, drive down there, and then a foot on, foot off handbrake, which is quite nice because it's not going to do foot one, hand on the other, which is a bit of a faff. And off we go, drifting away with the CVT, because CVTs are that kind of somewhere between lovely and weird kind of motion where you never actually change gears. Now, you might think that with a CVT gearbox and a 1.5 4-cylinder, it's not going to be the most sprightly of cars, but incredibly, it does have pretty impressive pickup up to about 20 miles an hour, or maybe even 30. Then you kind of do run out a bit of puff because basically you're pushing a big, square, flat-fronted object through the air. Then, of course, we hit the usual CVT-ness of you've no idea what gear it's attempting to be in, if that makes sense, because it's kind of just one long continuous gear. Whew, let's get some air conditioning going. Temperature down as low as it will go. Fan up a touch, here we go. It's an awful lot of fun. Already I'm seeing, even on these quiet little roads, people stopping and staring as they see it. People just don't know what it is. The visibility out of it is just phenomenal. Just look how tall this windscreen is, and the side windows are even taller. It's absolutely vast. Which way shall we go, left or right? What do you reckon? Should we go left? Oop. Okay, let's go left with the other indicator. Now, these seats, although they do look absolutely fantastic, they're not the most supportive, so you do slide around a little bit in them as you stop and go around corners, but they are quite comfortable on the long straight bits. Now, something that was commented on when these cars were new is the fact that because they were so big and tall and wide open with slightly plasticky surrounds in them, it did feel a bit like you're in a van, and it does have a kind of a funny echo in it because there's so much space for your voice to echo in. It's a little bit unusual feeling, actually, a bit like driving a Ford Connect or something like that. Now, if you were thinking, I do like the Cube, but there's not quite enough space in there for me, I need more chairs, don't worry, there was a longer one called the Cubik, which is 20 centimeters long and had a third row of 2 seats in the back. So you can have a full 7-seater, and those rear seats will fold completely flat, so you can actually have a fully flat load space. You can even sleep in the thing like a micro camper van. Now, as I said, this is in the M class of micro or mini MPV, which, to be honest, isn't a heavily populated area. I can't really think of any other cars in this particular class. I guess there's a few Japanese ones that might be doing the trick there. Even at fairly low speeds, you do get a bit of a lean on through a bend. Bear in mind, it's only a micro chassis underneath this thing. Okay, cornering at 40 miles an hour, it clings on quite happily, but boy does it roll through the bend. Whoa, that's fun. The steering does feel very sharp, very connected indeed. And I'm told, I haven't really had a chance to experience it yet, that the turning circle is epically good. Yes, I did try and indicate with the wipers again. Most people who wind up buying a Cube buy it because they've been hooked into Cube life. They want the lifestyle, the fun, the groups that go with it, and just driving something different. The owner of this car actually bought it for the same reason that most Japanese people buy them, which is the fact that they are incredibly practical. It's one of the few cars of this tiny size that you can get so much stuff into, that you can cram a family in and go away for a weekend if you want to. So he still uses it as a full-on family car. In fact, in the early noughties, when these were extremely popular, and current of course, it was pretty much standard to have one of these as your sort of second or weekday car, and something like an L Grand as your weekend big family cruiser. The ride is quite hard, surprisingly hard for such a small car. So you do feel a lot of the bumps through the road. And in terms of braking power, we're doing, well, 30 miles an hour. It's discs at the front, drums at the back. If I hit the brakes right now, it stops hard enough for the armrest to fall down, put it that way, which is, I'm going to call that more than adequate. It's not a heavy car, so you don't really need a lot of braking power. It's not going to be rising up to epic speeds either. So it's braking well within its capabilities and requirements. These seats are not the most supportive in the world. They're very comfortable. So as you settle in for perhaps a long drive or just cruise through the city, bear in mind it is very much a city car, hence the CVT and automatic only options, you'll be more than well supported. But if you go for a bit more spirited of a drive, you do feel you can slide a bit side to side, and certainly you can also submarine out of it if you brake too hard. Now, I like a quirky car, so it was pretty much a foregone conclusion I was going to enjoy driving this, and guess what? I do enjoy driving this. It's not going to set any records around any racetracks, but in terms of putting a smile on your face as an everyday driver, you really can't go wrong. And apparently it's ULEZ compliant as well, so if you need to drive one into London, you can do that without having your wallet torn apart. Oh, 405 Estate. This has been the best day for car spotting. There was a great big old Riley or Rover pulling out of a side road just as I was turning around a minute ago as well. The CVT was made by a company called Jatco, or if you went for the standard, more ordinary 4-speed auto, then I think that was a Nissan's own in-house item. Now you really can see why these were so popular in Japan. It's just immensely practical. If you've only got a small parking space, this is perfect. A little bit more useful than a K car, but certainly not taking up much more space. Now if you're wondering if looking after a car like this is difficult, well, it's not. It's basically a K12 Micra underneath the thing, so mechanically it's incredibly simple, and in terms of getting parts and maintaining it physically and bodily, I'm actually driving from a Cube specialist here in Essex today, so surprisingly not that hard. Because it was the biggest seller in Japan for about 7 years, there are lots of them around in Japan still being imported in quite big numbers, so getting hold of a car or parts for a car really aren't a problem. Now there's a couple of extra options on this Cvt Gearbox. There's a low range for crawling up hills and things, and there's a sports button which engages a yellow light on the dashboard and basically makes the revs rise slightly and not much else. So sport effectively makes the car a little bit louder. Holds it in what would be a lower gear if it wasn't a CVT. Doesn't really make it more responsive though. So, it's there though, makes you feel like you're having more fun. It's not massively fast, it rolls like crazy. The Cvt Gearbox, well, it does dull the performance after the first 20 miles an hour a wee bit, but it is just huge fun, and I like that. I mean, 0 to 60 is about 10 seconds, maybe even slower, but that's not the point. The point is, it's just a huge laugh driving the thing. There we go, here is a mini roundabout so we can test that fabled turning circle. Right, here we go. Yowzers, that is good. Turns on a dime, stops on a dime, turns on something else very small. What an enormously enjoyable car. I like this car. I've always liked the Cube. I've always been fascinated by the Cube. I always thought it was just such a clever idea just to take the micro-sized platform, and the micro platform over the couple of generations did give us so many other cars, the Figaro, the Pau, the various Renaults. I think it's shared with a generation of Clio and Capture, and even some Dachas have got micro basis underpinnings in there. In this case, it just shows that practical doesn't have to be boring, and it also goes to show you don't need a massive SUV to have lots of room or to have easy access into a car. This car is an answer to many questions you didn't know you were asking until now. Well, thanks for joining me today at the wheel of this hugely enjoyable and frankly very strange car. I hope you've enjoyed the ride. If you have, do please, as always, hit like and subscribe, and join me again next time driving something completely different.